classic songs that come from the American popular song tradition that flourished up until maybe around 1955 or 1960. You know, the kind of songs that came out of the musicals that were on Broadway, that came out of the classic films, both theme music and in movie musicals. These, you know, and also the hits of the day in the pre-rock and roll era. You know, great standards are being written to this day. One thing that makes, I think, a standard to a jazz musician is that something about the structure makes it enjoyable to play on. And so when enough people, enough musicians feel like they want to play a song, it becomes something that's a shared piece of repertoire among the community of jazz players at large. And that's what makes it a standard. So I can sit down with him. I've known him for many, many years, but even if we had never met before, and we sat down and he said, "What would you like to play?" And he said, "You want to play All Things You Are?" And we could do it. So that's what we're going to do right now. We'll play All the Things You Are. That's the fun in it, and that's a song. I think that's a song that jazz musicians like to play so much because there's something about All the Things You Are by Jerome Kern. This is an example of a tune that comes out of the musical theater tradition of, you know, I'm not sure when was that written? Is anybody Google that?
Say what?
What was that written in the 1930s or the early 1940s? Yeah.
Yeah, 30s.
And I mean, we know it from the jazz versions of it, and I think probably the first classic version of that song was recorded by Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker in 1945. So that's seems like a long time ago, and the song seems very old too. But at the time it was recorded and made into a jazz classic by Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie, it was almost like a current popular song. It had only been written maybe a few years, not any more than a few years before that. So so they were reacting to the popular music of the day. It's a little different to try to do that in popular music now because we don't have the same emphasis on harmony, for instance, that we did with these songs. So we have to do something a little bit different with the popular music of today. It's still very much possible to make those, to give popular music right now a jazz treatment, but the music will be a little bit different than the kind of style that we're playing. The style of music we're playing, we kind of call, there's a lot of different names to term it. I call it common practice jazz. So in other words, we sometimes talk about in music history about what they call the common, or music theory about the common practice period. That's where, you know, the music of Bach, Mozart, Haydn, so on and so forth. When the principles of harmony and modulation into different keys, and also the instrumental combinations became formularized and worked out to the point where great works of art took place, like the works of Bach or the symphonies of Mozart and Haydn, just as an example. The same thing happened in jazz, I believe, after the great achievements of the early days of jazz with people like Louis Armstrong, Earl Hines, the early Duke Ellington, and then brilliant precursors like Lester Young, the great tenor saxophonist. The common practice period of jazz really came about with the music that we call bebop. Bebop is the music of Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, the great pianist Bud Powell, Thelonious Monk, whose pictures you've got up around here, was one of the greatest composers and most creative figures of this period. And we tend to play the music of these great jazz musicians like Bird, that's what we call Charlie Parker, and Monk, the same way we play the music of Jerome Kern or Cole Porter or George Gershwin and the other writers of American popular song from this period of the 20th century seems to be a foundation stone of what, again, I call the common practice period of jazz music. So we all play different things from this. You know, I have a very wide taste in music, and I've played with so many different figures of music, ranging from very traditional to very modern, very contemporary. And it's you know, it can be music can be very different from this. But playing this sort of music kind of gives you the foundation to handle any kind of assignment musically in music that we kind of group under the name jazz. Because jazz is a term that can cover a whole lot of different music. You know, and jazz is it's up for grabs whether jazz is a term to describe music itself or to describe a way of looking at music. You know, and I think you could say both of those things would be true. Jazz is a style of music. Jazz, even though the word jazz is controversial to some, it still represents, to me, the achievement of African American culture and the way that African American culture has informed all of American culture and become sort of a overarching template to how we are as Americans, what makes us unique as Americans. And jazz really is representative of that. And I think that always that's something that jazz represents to me. But I mean, jazz is also taking what you have and doing something with it. You know, so you can play jazz from the cultures of Latin America, like I do when I play Latin jazz, and I'm very much a big part of my career has been playing Latin music and Latin jazz. Or if you have music from the Middle East, or if you have music from India, or if you have music from other parts of the world, you know, European symphonic music, you can apply the spirit and procedures of jazz to any of those kind of musics and make a new music that has to do with improvisation, that has to do with the freedom of individuals to make individual statements while working together in harmony. That relationship between the individual and the group is something that makes jazz, again, one of the proudest things that we have to show as a people in America. And you know, I recommend very much you know, reading some of Wynton Marsalis's books where he outlines like his ideas, which I endorse very much, about jazz being something that really illustrates America as a democracy in its most in its highest form. So we can do that with any kind of discussion. Anyhow, just some thoughts. Did anybody have any questions about anything? Right there.
How many songs can you play?
How many songs can I play? I have to. You mean by memory, right? Like, you know, I think that you have to keep going back and going over what you know, because you know it's like they say, rust never sleeps. You know, of course, and memory is something that goes, you know, that you know, you have to keep refreshed. I'd say I could probably play maybe between 300 or 400 things, like from memory, at this point, at any time. Right there.
Yeah, I was just going to add one thing to your question too. You know, a lot of what we're doing, and Brian mentioned it, but a lot of what we're doing is improvisation. So we're not necessarily memorizing every note, say, that Brian played. He's not playing it exactly the same way every time. A lot of what we're doing is improvised. So when we're talking about playing these songs, and we're actually doing a lot of improvising. And how many of you are playing jazz or doing a little bit of improvising? So some of you know what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Right there.
When did you first get playing?
I started playing in 5th grade, like everybody did, like everybody does. So that was a question, right?
Yep.
When, yeah. So they started us out in the tonettes in 4th grade, right? You know, a little, you know,
The recorder or something?
Well, it was like a plastic, like these little plastic recorders, you know, and they call them different things. They call them tonettes back then at Parkway. Right? And then 5th grade, we got the instruments. I wanted to play a saxophone because I saw a TV show and they had a rock group and a guy was playing a saxophone, Dave Clark 5, right? And so I wanted one of those because I wanted to be on TV, you know, or something. But then the dentist said, no, he's got to overbite. The saxophone wouldn't be good for him. So got stuck with this thing. That's how it all started. Yeah.
How long have you been playing jazz specifically?
I got really, I think I really hit the jazz bug really hit when I was maybe around 15, 14 or 15. So I'd been playing the trumpet through grade school and middle school, and I think, I don't know, I mean, I never really practiced it or anything. You know, I could read music well, and it seemed like, I mean, the story I love to tell is like that for about, I think a period of about 2 months in 6th grade, I was playing the trumpet with a colored pencil stuck up the lead pipe and didn't even know it. You know, a little one, right? So that's where I was at in terms of the seriousness of my musical career at that time. And I even stopped playing for a little while. But then I came back to it, and again, it's like, you know, I started playing with little bands, playing like, you know, what we used to call jazz rock, or you know, what they call horn bands, you know, like playing Chicago, you know, the music of the group Chicago, or some rhythm and blues kind of stuff, like Buddy Miles was somebody who was popular back then, or Sly and the Family Stone. And then there's a kind of a continuum between that stuff and jazz, because of the horns and because there was some improvisation that the horn players could do in that stuff. So I think through that, things kind of went quickly, and I started hearing the music on the radio, and then I don't know what happened. I just got really into it. And by the time I think I was 15, I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to try to see if I can do this sort of thing. Don't know why, but that's how it happened. Yeah.
For both of you, what was the most difficult kind of aspect about learning your instruments? Like, what was the most difficult part about it?
Getting a sound. I mean, that's still like every day, right? I mean, trumpet is an instrument where you have to take a certain amount of time, no matter how gifted you are, and I'm not saying that I was all that naturally talented to play the instrument, to like work on both the development and the maintenance of your basic technique. You know, very much in the same sense like a dancer would work at the bar, or an athlete will do conditioning, you know, like on a daily basis in order to stay in playing condition. The same thing happens. I mean, this is true on every instrument, but I just think it's a little bit. I mean, you know, I literally, if I didn't play for a whole week, I wouldn't be able to make one squeak out of this thing, you know. So you have to take this thing on vacations, and like, you know, and the whole 9 yards. You know. Back there one more time. Say a little.
Same trumpet you played in 5th grade.
Is this one?
Yeah.
No. I had a Sears Silvertone trumpet from the catalog, and then it got stolen. And when they went into the music store to get the mouthpiece, was stuck, taken out. The store got broken into, and that one got taken. So then they replaced it with a York trumpet. That was the worst thing I think I've ever played on. That's why I didn't realize that there was a colored pencil stuck in the leaf line. It's not about the same with the pencil in or out. Then after that, I'm going to tell you about all the trumpets I've had. Let's see, I got a Holton Collegiate when I got into high school, and then my first real professional trumpet was a Benge 3X Plus. My dad still has it. And after that, I started playing Bach's. I played a brand of trumpet called the Monette, which is a very fancy trumpet for a number of years, like the kind of what Marcellus plays. And I've been playing Yamaha trumpets for the last 12 years. So that's what I'm playing. Yeah,
Are you sponsored by anybody?
I'm sponsored by Yamaha. I'm a Yamaha artist, and they do contribute some extra funding to visits like these. So that's actually, thank you for pointing it out. So I can just thank them. They make great instruments, and their commitment to education has been really strong and really vital over the years, I think.
I think one more, and then maybe we'll have some of the kids play. Or yeah,
He's good.
Mr. Schick.
I play jazz all day in the gym.
All
I
right.
have class in 5 minutes. Can I hear one song?
Oh, you guys want to do one more?
Yeah.
And then maybe we can have the middle school kids.
Oh,
play.
should we do one more?
Maybe.
Have you been able to hear it from here?
Yeah, right, yeah.
The music in the gym?
Oh, yeah.
I walked by, I thought Brian was in there warming up. I was like, what was that?
I think that, so just saying one thing, we talk about these fundamental kind of things that we all know how to play, and like, so there's the standards. There's two forms that we talk about often, that a whole class of songs, or like almost like a whole species of songs, can be under the structure of what we call I Got Rhythm Changes, which comes from the song by George Gershwin, but it's been adapted by many jazz musicians to make their own melodies under the structure of it. And the other one is the blues. The blues is one of the most fundamental musical structures play on, I think, that exists in music. So there's so many different blues. So playing the blues, you know, and you can play the blues in a down-home bluesy way, or you can play the blues form as a means for involved improvisation. And I think we're going to do it in that sense. So we're going to play something. This is a song by Charlie Parker called Au Revoir, and we will play on blues form.
Are Gibsons bad trumpets, or am I just that bad at this?
Gibsons are good trumpets.
You're not bad.
Okay. Ready? 1, 2, 1.
the middle school combo get set up and we'll play a quick tune for.
So we Joe Jamie?
Yeah, right. Our drummer's in Hawaii right now.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. Poor thing. So we're gonna play Equinox.
Didn't want to ruin
You guys ready? Right. Oh, sorry.
Get that bass. Yeah.
We're doing it in C.
Play the C minor.
Yep. Ready? Nope. Oh, Joey, somehow that plug came out. Power.
Oh, this one.
Yep. There it is. Ready? Intro. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
You want to play goal.
I want to play football. That's, they didn't want to do it.
You want to get
I want to. Because I know that. 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Lynch?
How do you build the repertoire of things that you play in terms of how do you make each time you're playing through tune different?
Well, one thing that I think can be a little bit there can be a confusion about what we do when we improvise, right? So for many people, we say, well, you improvise, oh, so you're just making it up as you go along, right? It's like, or we're just, it's you know, it's something from the air or something like that. Well, it's not so much that you're making up everything. It's that you have certain melodies, you have certain kinds of, you know, things that you like to play, that you've heard played. Just like it's much in the same way that we learn how to talk. You know, it's like you learn how to talk not from a book, but from by listening to your parents first of all, then that everybody who's around you in your environment speaking, and so you learn words, and you learn phrases, and you learn how to put things together, and you learn what all those things mean by hearing things being used in conversation, you know. So it's much the same in playing jazz, is that we listen to music and we pick up things, and especially when we listen to jazz players on live or on recordings, and we hear things and we pick those things up. Maybe we're able to like sing along with them or whistle along with them, or maybe we listen to the recording many times until we can learn a solo or learn a piece of music by heart. And from there, it becomes like, you know, something that's part of our own language, our own vocabulary. And so improvising is kind of taking it's like talking. We take all the vocabulary we have in order to convey meaning and to carry on a conversation. And most importantly, when you're playing jazz and you're soloing, you're telling a story. And you know, so in order to tell that story, we have to have all our, you know, we have to have all our words, know our vocabulary, also know our grammar, and all, you know, all the other aspects, you know, rhythm, knowing harmony, knowing melody, and all those kind of things. But when working on things, I might take a solo that I know, that I've learned. Say one solo that many jazz trumpet players know pretty well. They've learned it. They all have to do it. Is one by a great trumpet player, one of my mentors, a man named Freddie Hubbard, and he had a famous trumpet solo on a blues called "Bird Like," where at the beginning of that solo, every trumpet player knows it. It's like it goes. The second chorus goes. So I learned that piece of music from listening to a record, right? So then, well, I'm gonna take those things and I'm gonna learn how to play them so I can do it, you know, when it comes in naturally to be in the flow of the music. I think improvising is where you start out with an idea and then you let one idea take you to another idea and then to another. But those ideas are composed of things of words, right? And then so it's kind of like learning how to use the word properly or a phrase properly when you take something like, you know, taking that, then saying, okay, well, pieces of the music that I've learned, and I practice doing this. This is why I can do it. So I can play them in any key. So that means that I can weave those melodies or shapes that come out. And shape is something that's really important. We have shapes. They go up, they go down. They're detailed. They're not detailed. They might go like this. They might go like that in one range, or downstairs in one range. You know, it might be angular. It might be like a snake eating its own tail sometimes. You know, it's like the difference between playing something like. Very angular, right? But then you have something like. It's like a snake going around and around, and chasing its own tail in a very limited space. So the idea of shapes are really important. Shapes is what structures your story, and a lot. But then we also have the part of it that is like, I might play something, and it's there's a link in a chain that goes from me back to Freddie Hubbard, back to Clifford Brown, back to Roy Eldridge, and then to Louis Armstrong, because each of those people listened to the older person when he was coming up. So, and then there's people who even listened to me a little bit and maybe took something from me, like my students, like Philip, who was here on Monday, was one of my students in high school and also a little bit later. So it's like an unbroken chain of tradition, which to me is one of the things that means the most to me, is that there's something that's kind of communicated and handed down in a very like, you know, you can say it like in a folkloric kind of way, and we always have to remember that jazz is folkloric music in the very best sense of the term. It's music that is about people, you know, it's about people, and certainly it's representative of something very strong culturally. So, yeah.
How about a big round of applause for Mr. Brian Lynch?
Thank you. Good job being here. I hope you'll be able to come back.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, I'd love to.